Let's go back to the immediate post-revolutionary period and talk a little bit about how women in that post-revolutionary period, how women of a certain class, you might say, thought of themselves and what they thought of their relationship to the new government that had been formed.
Well, of course, women across class had been involved in the Revolutionary War itself. After the war, I think you see more of a class division that occurs, and the women who are very active, I would say, played an important political and social role in the creation of the new nation and in the construction of its political institutions were largely elite women. The women of the new elite classes that hoped to replace the British aristocracy and the British office holders who had managed the American colonies, who wanted to replace them in their positions within a hierarchical structure, social structure that they did not wish to change.
And women?
And women were central to this. One, the new nation had to prove, as all post-colonial nations do, that it was civilized, that it was cultured, that it had a right to be considered an independent member of the world of nations, of functioning nations. So Americans had to prove, European Americans had to prove that they were not savages in a savage land, which was how the British aristocracy and the British press, for that matter, liked to represent them. And a key role in saying that we are civilized, that we are cultured, that we are polite and have taste was by displaying their women. And the women took this as a personal challenge, and they felt they rose quite well to it. And so they reproduced many of the social forms and rituals that the British aristocracy and the British landed classes had. I would say the most prominent, and I think the most interesting, was the female salon, which they had from England, but also obviously from France.
What's a female salon?
It's an evening gathering in which sort of the leading social lights, but also the leading political and intellectual lights of the community gather for conversation.
Men as well as women?
Men as well as women, but the women, I think, are the lure. They dress beautifully. I mean, we think of this, the classic ones are the French salons of the late 18th century, leading up to the Revolution, Madame Roland and other very intelligent, educated, well-spoken women whom men want to come and talk to, and who, in fact, introduce new ideas and new perspective than the men might not have. So one of these places in the new nation was Martha Washington's levees, which she would have once a week, and she would invite the leading women of the community to come, and then the men would follow, vice presidents, presidents,
So
congressmen.
are you saying that Martha Washington actually ran a salon?
Yes. But anyway, these women would have these salons. When the capital moved from New York to Philadelphia, then this whole culture expanded exponentially, because Philadelphia in the 1790s was in fact the print culture of America, the financial culture of America at that time, the commercial center. And so there were many, many rich merchants whose wives would have these salons, and this is where essentially the Federalist Party took birth, and where political deals were made.
So you're saying that these salons are not just intellectual abstractions, but are politically influential?
Oh, very.
Tell us how.
That's where politics occurs. It occurs at these salons as people are sitting around and they discuss. They're congressmen, they're senators, they're journalists, and they discuss the legislation that's coming up. They discuss foreign policy. The women are there, they're very informed, they lobby particular congressmen for particular issues. These elite salons are largely Federalist, but Republican politicians are there as well.
And the women who organize them and participate in them, do you think they have any influence, any power, or is power too strong a word?
I think they have influence. Remember, this is a pretty small society at this point. We're not talking about New York in 2016. We're talking about New York or Philadelphia with a very small population and a very small elite class that is basically running the country at this point.
But now move a little bit from this question of influence exerted through grace and charm to power. Can we talk about power, political power, economic power, any kind of power for women in this early 19th century period?
Well, I think we want to start thinking about how women who had little power in the colonial period, how little public power in the colonial period, how those women began to gradually accumulate it, and what we are talking about when we use the word power. So I think one would be education. And education was, in fact, seen as very important to these women. Aaron Burr, for instance, is famous for almost single-handedly educating his daughter to be one of the most educated women in the Atlantic world. Obviously, Abigail Adams was also fortunate in having been educated by her father. So getting education for women and getting substantive education for women was an important movement in the late 18th century, and certainly we see this as a cause of men and women in the 1790s. A place to look for this discussion would be in Benjamin Rush's little short treatise called Alcuin, in which he has and here again would be an example of a woman's salon. He is going to this evening's entertainment at a woman's house, and she engages him. She says, or he engages her, he says sort of mockingly, "What do you think of the political party, or of the Federalist Party?" And she responds magnificently. She says, "How dare you ask me that, since I don't have the vote, since I don't have legal status in the courts as a married woman, et cetera, how dare you ask me about politics?" And then she goes into an entire exposition of the powerlessness of women in that particular society. Rush is one of the big advocates of women's education, and that they should be educated in the sciences as well as in the fine arts or in literature.